Good day. Happy September. This is Dorothy Boyd, National Sales Director. I'm just so thankful, first of all, to have all of y'all on today. I feel very blessed with some things I want to share with you that I really feel like the Lord gave me. He does not wake me up early in the morning or in the middle of the night very often with very detailed things that I just have to absolutely get up and write all down, or I won't be able to go back to sleep. But he did yesterday, and it's always a very humbling feeling when that happens. And I'm always so grateful for it because I know it's not me. I can barely find my way into the kitchen to run my Keurig first thing in the morning, much less complete a sentence. We have a saying around our house that I go through evolution every morning. I wake up as this sort of amoeba floating in a pool, and it takes me till about noon before I'm walking erect. And so nobody can talk to me the first hour or two. So anytime in the middle of the night, I get up to go to the bathroom, and suddenly in my brain, there's this very detailed class I'm to teach, and I go, oh, right. And I try to go back to sleep, and it just keeps building in my head, so I have to get up and write it all down. And so that's what happened yesterday. And then this morning, he said, no, I've got some more, and he woke me up at 7:30. So y'all know this is for you. And I really feel like this information applies to consultants or directors. So I'm going to talk fairly generically, mostly to directors because that's who I have on this Zoom, but I really feel like it applies to consultants too. And hopefully this is a piece that we'll be able to keep and file under the category of emotional management. You're not in Mary Kay even 30 minutes in my area that you don't start hearing about the emotional wheel. And just as a quick review, we start out in a new endeavor or a new goal, and we're excited about it. And then when we begin to take action, or even if we procrastinate taking action, whatever, the next step is frustration. Things don't go like we expect them to. And the frustration gap then is the distance between what we expect and the reality. Okay, think about that. What we expect to happen, our expectation is up here. What really happens is here. And so this gap is the frustration gap. And the bigger the gap, the stronger the frustration, the more strongly we feel that emotion. And so what happens when we get frustrated is then we recognize that emotion for what it is, and then we have a choice about our response. If we make choices that widen the gap, then it puts us in phase 3, which is discouragement. Discouragement. And that's even worse, because in discouragement, not only are we frustrated, but we've lost our confidence. And our heart is not in it. Our heart is not in it right then. We are discouraged. The word cœur is a French word for heart. So when we're discouraged, our heart isn't in it anymore. And so then we really have a bigger choice to make. Do we resign? Do we give up? Do we say, what was I thinking setting that goal at seminar? Look at me here Labor Day week, and not only have I not made progress on that goal, I've gone backwards. I'm in a worse place than I was 2 months ago. What was I thinking about that goal? We either, shelve the goal, or we say, no, wait a minute. What are the controllable factors here that I can control? There may be a gap here, but what can I do to narrow this gap? What can I do to close this gap? And quite honestly, that's the critical point at which we can either make choices that widen the gap, or we can make choices that narrow the gap. If we make choices that widen the gap, then we risk that ultimate state of denial, which says, what was I thinking? I can't do that. Our consultants do it, and they quit Mary Kay, or they give up on their goals, or they creatively avoid their work, really depending upon their personality style. That's going to maybe take different forms, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But ultimately, that creative avoidance takes over. We lose belief, we give up on the goal, or we give up on our business entirely. Or we resign, and we say, oh my goodness, this is just an emotion. Emotions are fickle. They're not reliable. It's not how I feel that's so important right now. It's how I respond to this negative emotion and how I process this negative emotion and what am I going to do with it and manage it so that I can take that pain that I'm feeling and use it as a learning process to strengthen me, make me greater, and then I re-sign to the goal, maybe adjust the time frame a little bit, but I re-sign, and then it puts me back up in phase one. A little wiser phase one, but back in phase one again, we're excited, but we've learned something from the process. So one of my favorite phrases from Dr. Phil is this, that great philosopher, Dr. Phil. When you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences. When you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences. You hear him say that a lot on his show. So what I want to do is give you a list of, you can call them do's and don'ts, but I think what I really like better is the do's, close the gap. The don'ts, widen the frustration gap. So it's really not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of which choice is going to either cause me to be in a position where I'm more frustrated, or which is going to put me in a position where the frustration begins to diminish. Because let's face it, leaders, when we're dealing with people, they're messy and they can be very frustrating. Who agrees with that?
Yeah.
That's right. And in our business, the more we deal with people, the more great outcomes we get, but also the more vulnerable we become to the negative emotions. And so the first thing to close the gap is to find a healthy physical release for those negative emotions. Find a healthy release for those negative physical emotions. And you know what works for you. It might be going to the gym. It might be taking your dogs for a walk. It may be, I have a national friend that when she gets really frustrated and feels out of control, she gets mad and she starts doing heavy house cleaning. She says, yes, I'll go into my bathroom and start scrubbing my grout with a toothbrush, you know, that level of physical release, because what happens is she's working out that emotion, but she's always also getting a sparkling clean bathroom, right? So that's a healthy way to handle it. The don't, or what will widen the gap rather than narrow it, is to stuff the emotion, to try to deny the emotion and say, I shouldn't feel this way. Or I'm embarrassed that I feel this way, so I'm not going to let myself have a good cry, or I'm not going to allow myself to feel this feeling. And so what happens is we stuff it down. But what Bill Cantrell taught me probably 25 years ago is that a negative emotion, if it's stuffed, will emerge later. In another day and another time. Ultimately, it will emerge, and usually in a much unhealthier way. True? So there is a very, very negative consequence to stuffing the emotion. We have to find a healthy way to release it. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, to close the gap. Remind yourself that those negative feelings are normal. There's nothing wrong with you. We all have our emotional vulnerable places. The enemy knows exactly where yours are. He knows where mine are. Leadership is hard. The emotional management is the hardest part of it. So don't widen the gap by asking yourself questions that beat yourself up, like, what's wrong with me? Why do I always react this way? You're not wrong. You're just human. So don't be so hard on yourself. All right. So that's number two. Here's the third one. To narrow the gap, make a decision that you're going to live and operate out of character and duty. John Maxwell, in his great initial book, Developing the Leader Within You, delineates the difference in being emotion-driven and being character-driven. And you've all heard it in Mary Kay. If you haven't, it basically is, do you make decisions based on how you feel, or do you make decisions based upon what's the wisdom of the situation? What's the wisest thing to do in this situation? regardless of how I feel. That's not saying the feeling is wrong. It's just saying we got to set aside that feeling, compartmentalize it, put it up on a shelf temporarily, get the job done, and then come back and deal with the feeling at an appropriate time. And if you want to widen the gap, if you want to ultimately lead to more frustration, then give yourself permission to be emotion driven. If it feels good, you do it. Character driven people, duty driven people do it and then they feel good. They don't wait to feel brave, they choose courage. So deciding to live and operate as a character-driven person or a duty-driven person, and every one of you can do that. You did it when you worked another job. You had to, or you would have been fired. So rather than saying, oh, I can't do that, recognize that, oh, yes, you can, and what you can do for another employer, you can do for you. And understanding that you're not doing yourself any favors by taking your freedom as an entrepreneur to the extreme of operating by emotion. The next thing you can do to close the gap is put it in perspective. Put it in perspective. You know, whatever you're dealing with right now, beloved sales director, BD consultant, whatever, whether it's business related, personally, chances are it's more than one. None of us are cleaning out a flooded house in Houston right now, are we?
No.
So let's put that in perspective, okay? None of us are sitting there in Cuba waiting for the biggest hurricane on record to hit, right? Okay, so let's put it in perspective. If you want to, you know, sitting and feeling sorry for yourself, having that pity party only widens the gap. That's not something you want to do. All right, the fifth thing to widen the gap or narrow the gap. It's very easy when we're feeling the pain of disappointment and frustration to begin to begrudge our position as a leader. We never begrudge it when things are working, do we? At least I don't. Do you ever begrudge your position when things aren't working? Why did God call me to this? Why do I have to put up with this? Receive your calling as the gift that it is. And understand that to whom much is given, much is required. And so to close the gap, adjust the attitude to not I have to book, but I have the privilege of booking. Trust me, the directors and consultants in Houston right now would love to have the privilege of booking 10 parties right now. All right, I think this is the sixth thing on the list. Don't take it personally. Q-tip, quit taking it personally. If other people are not responding the way you think they should, ought, or must, it's not a reflection of you or your leadership. People make decisions based on their own autobiography and their own filters. It isn't about you. And so the minute you begin to personalize that, you're widening your frustration gap. Instead of taking it personally, take personal responsibility. If you want to close the frustration gap, take personal responsibility. You do have the capacity to change the situation. You do have the capacity to change this situation, whatever it is. You need money, you have the capacity to create income. You look at it, the people that you're supposed to be influencing and you don't like what you see, it's not your job to fix them. It's your job to fix you. And it's amazing what happens when you begin to fix you. That's called taking personal responsibility. It takes courage to anchor your vision even more deeply when you cannot see it at all. As a matter of fact, all the evidence you're seeing is just the opposite. But that is exactly what you need to do. If you lose sight of your vision when things are not happening, if the leader loses sight of the vision, the frustration gap is only going to get wider. If the leader says, I can't see it, but my job as a leader is to employ that law of navigation that John Maxwell talks about, where I see it before other people see it, I see it bigger than other people see it, I see it longer than other people see it, and that's why I'm a leader. And even though there is no evidence of it, I'm anchoring this vision even more deeply today. And when you do that, you close the frustration gap. When you have to believe it before you see it, before you believe it, you are choosing to go back to being emotion driven. When you choose to believe it before you see it, you're choosing to be character and duty driven. And it is a choice. How do you anchor your vision even more deeply, even more meaningfully? That's a very personal thing, but the Miracle Morning will support that in a beautiful way.
Yeah, exactly.
If when you feel very frustrated, you get mad at your people, whether your people are in your house, on your team, in your unit, you're going to widen the frustration gap. Rather than judging them harshly, choose to love them unconditionally. Unconditionally, of course, means regardless of how they act. It's not our place to judge them. If you're judging them, you're not loving them. The next thing that will widen the gap is choosing to wallow in the disappointment. It's okay to feel disappointed for about 5 minutes. And then you say, wait a minute. I choose to be undisappointable. I choose to be undisappointable. That begins to close the gap. Start asking questions. Ask lots of questions. Be the world's greatest question asker. If you don't feel confident about asking questions, John Maxwell has a book on that too. Become a student of it. Because if you want to close the gap, you got to start investigating. You got to start asking questions, and you got to stop making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. Followers jump to conclusions. Followers make assumptions, but leaders do not try to be mind readers. They ask. And they ask and they ask and they ask until they feel like they can step into that other person's experience. Not asking for the objective of one-upping that person, not asking for the purpose of manipulating that person, but asking for the purpose of really stepping into where their thinking is and where their life is, because that's the only way you can move them. And if you love them enough to want to move them, that means you got to ask some tough questions. They'll thank you later. They may not like it at the time, but they'll thank you later. All right, next thing. If you want to close the gap, get out the door and start intentionally connecting with other people. If you want to close the gap, get out the door every day and intentionally connect with other people. Don't just hide out in your house. That only perpetuates the problem. That increases the gap. That's what you may want to do. That's what you probably feel like doing. But it's only going to increase your level of frustration, because the outcome is there's not going to be any change. And the longer that you stay in that frustration point, the sooner it gets to discouragement, then denial. Understand it's a danger zone. You got to put out the fire. All right, next, close the gap by reaching up. Reach up. It's what you got a national for. Don't reach out to people at your level. If you want to increase your frustration gap, reach out to other people at your level. Sales director strugglers cannot help strugglers. And when you reach out and and garner support from other strugglers to validate how you're feeling and your lack of activity, all you do is increase the frustration gap for all concerned. Reach up. All right, next. If you want your frustration gap to get bigger, continue to tolerate small numbers from yourself. Continue to shortchange your future by not holding enough parties and personal career talks. Every goal has a required workload. It's not something you can get around. And volume solves a lot of problems in Mary Kay. There's not a problem probably on your plate that holding 10 parties in September would not fix. True? So if you want to narrow the gap, radically increase your volume of IPA activity. Radically. I don't mean if you held one party in August, you hold 2. I mean, if you haven't held a party in a year, you hold 10. You shoot yourself out of a cannon. You do a 10-show week or 2 5-show weeks back to back. I call it shooting myself out of a cannon. That's what I always did. And the sooner you recognize that what's out there is not going to produce what I need, and you grab your starter kit and you go power start, the sooner you pivot and do that, the faster you will eliminate that gap. And the longer you take to negotiate with yourself about whether you're going to do that or not, the wider the gap gets and the more confidence that we lose. I understand the reluctance, trust me. But I double dog dare you that if your starter kit is not up to speed and ready to grab and hold a party right now because you haven't held one in so long, that you invest in a brand new starter kit and you go wear it out this seminar year. Write this down. 10 plus 10 plus 1,000. 10 plus 10 plus 1,000. What would happen if every director in our area was required, in order to keep her directorship, to hold 10 parties, 10 personal career talks, and sell enough to order 1,000 wholesale every single month from September to June? I can't even imagine it. Can you? I would like to think that that would be your minimum expectation of yourself, because there's not a director in our area that financially and from a unit growth perspective is not, with the exception of one, Pat, who's probably not able-bodied at this point, but every one of you is able-bodied to do it, and the rest of you are perfectly capable of doing it, and it would radically change the whole trajectory of your future if you did it, and the people that you lead. Think about what your production in August would have been, the difference in just your August production, just August. If you had sold enough to order an additional $1,000 wholesale over whatever you did order. Nobody else in your unit did anything else, but you had held 10 parties more than you did, and you had so that would have given you enough to order at least 1,000 more. And if you'd held 10 career talks, you probably would have recruited a couple of people. Probably one of them would have come in qualified, maybe one with a smaller order. So there's another, probably 2,000 wholesale more would have gone in, 1,500 to 2,000 more than went in. Plus, then you have 2 new people that you can help get pearls this month. So if you want to widen the gap, continue to shortchange yourself. Continue to delude yourself that there is a shortcut, there's a way around it, you don't need to do it. Whatever the resistance is, I don't have enough people, fill in the blank. But I believe that I have the resources and people I need to create my very best year. So do you. It starts with your belief, honestly. The next thing on the list, if you want to close the gap, seek leaders. Have a radar up for leaders at your parties, in your customer base, in your circle of influence, on your team. Seek leaders, build leaders, look for professional women, and do that with a high degree of intentionality. If you want to widen the frustration gap, continue to seek followers. Followers are people that you know you can get an easy yes from because they fill a seat and they make you feel good because they're filling a seat. They're checking off a box, but they're not moving. They're not growing the unit. They're not growing the team. They're not growing your future. They probably would have been better off staying customers. Seek leaders. It's harder emotionally to reach out to leaders and professional women because if they say no, it stings a little bit more. It impacts our self-esteem a little bit. It's a little bit tougher a rejection to take. But if we choose not to take it personally and we go ahead and ask them anyway, we feel the fear and we ask them anyway, here's what you find out. When they say yes, aren't they a whole lot easier to work with? Because they're reliable and they have means. They can buy the product. They're confident. They have a circle of influence to be a hostess. They have money to put into inventory. So they're harder to ask, but easier to work with. The people that are the easy yes, they're easier to ask, but then they're harder to work with. So that's just widens the frustration gap. Okay, next on the list. Close the gap by utilizing the tools and resources at your fingertips. If I was to say, okay, PowerBook Flash, show me your September production sheet, production projection for this month. If I was to ask you to flash it, is that tool filled out?
Yep.
Good, yay Jill, okay. You know, that's a tool that I've promised you will increase your income in production by 15%. How do I know? Because I've paid attention to my own production over the 27 years I was a director. And the months that I projected my production, I did about 15% more. I paid attention. Utilize the tools that you have. Don't just admire the tool, use the tool. Work the tool. Don't underestimate those resources at your fingertips. And that's what widens the gap, is underestimating the resource. Okay? If you want to widen your frustration gap, okay, hear my heart on this one. Let's talk about how to narrow the gap first. If you want to narrow the gap, look in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, I want you to realize that you have a champion looking back at you, a very highly skilled, committed champion looking back at you. And recognize that you are looking at your breakthrough when you look in the mirror. You are your own breakthrough. It's critically important, leader, that you are investing in your own personal growth and development if you want to lead at a high level, that you're investing every day in your own personal growth and development. How will we do this? Well, again, the Miracle Morning, if you're signed up for the Pacesetter class, that tells me I understand. I have a resource. I have a national. I'm plugging into her. I may not be excited about what she's going to ask me to do. I may not be looking forward to that level of accountability, but I tell you what I am committed to is my own personal growth and development. And I'm willing to invest in that. if we're not heavily invested in our own personal growth and development, what we tend to do is look to our people, or worse, to one person for our breakthrough. Or we look to a promotion that we're running for our breakthrough. Or we look to an event that we're in charge of to create our breakthrough. Sometimes when we feel overwhelmed with that negative emotion, our natural tendency, and I think this comes from a standpoint of personal protection, is to say, yes, we go back to basics. That's good. Go back to basics. That closes the gap. You do go back to basics at those times. But don't narrow that focus so narrowly that you're putting all your eggs in one basket, leader. Do y'all know what I'm saying about that? I've had directors say to me, well, I'm just going to focus on this one thing right now. And I want to go, what? One thing? And then they'll tell me, and they'll have a rational strategy why that one strategy is, I'm just overwhelmed. This is all I can focus on one time right now is this one thing. Well, I understand the feeling of being overwhelmed, and this business is simple, but it isn't that simple. Here's the simplicity. We hold parties. From those parties, we sell 2 sets, we book 2 parties, we book 2 career talks. That is the simplicity of our business. When the simplicity of our business is, I'm just building reds right now. That's my own only strategy is I'm building reds. No. Who taught you that one strategy is going to build you a great unit? Yes, of course we have to build reds. You're finding the leaders at your parties, and you're using the Pearl Girl program to help those new people that you're recruiting this month get into their red jackets. Yes, but it still has to boil down to my own personal parties worked full circle. You are your breakthrough. So yes, when you're overwhelmed, and ladies, being a leader, being an entrepreneur means that we have to gain a tolerance for a certain amount of overwhelm. It is not my goal to not overwhelm someone. I don't want to overwhelm anyone, but it's not my goal to set up a system that's not overwhelming. Why is that not my goal as a national sales director or even as a sales director? Because it's impossible not to overwhelm a new consultant. You cannot do it. Because this is a big business in a little box. And as soon as she starts training, that world begins to open up to her. And anytime our vision is expanded, we feel a sense of overwhelm. What is my goal is to help people manage those feelings of being overwhelmed and to help them break that down into manageable bite-sized pieces and step-by-step processes that they can manage. That is my goal. But it's not my goal to not overwhelm you, leader, because I don't want to complicate matters just for the sake of complicating them. But I also want you to be strong and solid and mature. And that means you've got to be able to handle a certain level of overwhelm. Do y'all hear that? Hear what I'm saying? There's a fine line there. Okay, you want to widen the gap? Make excuses. Justify your reluctance to create change. What I find when I'm working with leaders, strong red jackets, directors, and I'm hearing what could be labeled an excuse, is I don't see it as an excuse for excuse's sake. That's not how I judge it. What I see it as is that it's coming from a limiting belief. So when you recognize that what you're saying may have a whole lot of truth to it, as a matter of fact, it may be your reality at the time, very much so, and be very valid as something that you feel is a legitimate obstacle for you. It becomes an excuse when it becomes a reason why you're not making good choices and moving forward. And so you have to ask yourself, well, what limiting belief is holding me back here? And sometimes it takes somebody else saying something very radical to erase that limiting belief. And I'm going to give you all an example, personal example. Pam Shaw said something on stage that hit me in the core. She said in her fabulous speech at the Diamond Seminar, she said, "You are not a victim of your biology or DNA. God's mercies are new every day." That pierced me to the core, because for 11 years I have felt a victim of my biology and DNA. And so I was very convicted when she said that, because I don't want to live as a victim. I want to be a victor. So I've said to myself, I've affirmed out loud every day since, I am not a victim of my biology or DNA. God's mercies are new every day. That was a limiting belief for me, that just because the pathology says my body doesn't function well, there is no cure, it's not ever going to function right ever again, I still don't have to be a victim to that. I still have choices. And I may not like the choices, but I still have a choice. And so since seminar, I've had to make some even tougher choices having to do with what I consume. And to be quite honest, I've had to absolutely virtually eliminate putting anything in my mouth that I enjoy eating or drinking, except for coffee. Although I do drink it black now. And I've learned to like it black. But the results are worth it, okay? And so just know that you are not a victim of whatever. God's mercies are new every day, and you do have a choice.
Can you say that again, what she said, Pam?
She said, you are not a victim. Well, my affirmation is, I am not a victim of my biology or DNA. God's mercies are new every day. So a part of that becomes affirming powerful truths that contradict the limiting beliefs. And let me tell you, a lot of the affirmations that I'm saying every day still have no evidence, zero evidence. It's taking total faith to even say them out loud. But others, like that one, are showing fruit now after 2 months of saying them. And so I know that the others will bear fruit ultimately. Next, on widening and closing the gap. Close the gap. Do give yourself adequate but very strategic breaks. Do give yourself adequate but very strategic breaks. I'm talking about mental breaks, physical, emotional. I'm not talking now about necessarily going on a week-long vacation. Sometimes if I want a mental break, I can just work the Sunday crossword, and that gives me a mental break, okay? It takes a few hours, but I can get her done, all right? That allows me to really mentally focus on something else. Or it could be a whole week-long vacation or anything in between. But if you want to widen the frustration gap, and directors, I want you to look at me and read my lips eyeball to eyeball, because somehow I haven't gotten this through to y'all, okay? Look at me. Pretend like I have your face in my hands, okay? Every time you take a day off, 2 days off, 3 days off, 4 days off, 5 days off, 6 days off, however many days off you take for vacation, if double that number of days when you get back is not booked before you leave, solidly booked, you are going to break your momentum in two, and your vacation is going to last twice as long. I'm going to say that again. However many days you're taking off, let's say you're going to take off a long weekend, 4 days, Thursday to Sunday, and you've got something with your family planned, Thursday to Sunday. Then double that, 8 days. The 8 days after that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. The next 8 days need to be solidly booked, 10 parties booked during that 8-day period before you leave on Thursday. so that when you come home on Sunday and you unpack, you've got a party to go hold on Monday. If you come home to an empty date book, you come home to a subpar date book, you come home to a skimpy date book, your 4-day vacation now becomes an 8 or 10 or 12-day vacation, and you have broken your momentum. You can only afford to take time off if you strategically set it up where no momentum is broken. I have done that since I was a brand new consultant, and somehow I've missed getting that through to my directors. So I want y'all to get it. Of course you want to take time off. But I'm seeing, what I'm observing is vacations being taken time and time again that were not strategically planned and where the date book was not packed on the front end and the back end. It would be nice if on the days I chose to take off, I could suspend my bills, but it doesn't work that way. They keep coming in frightening regularity in my mailbox, right? So the only way you can make that work is to work twice as hard before you leave and twice as hard after you get back. Just like when I taught school. If I was sick, if my child was sick and I had to not teach school, I had to have a substitute teacher. But boy, was the work piled up when I got back, right? Don't set yourself up for that. Next. It is human nature to move toward pleasure and away from pain. Human nature to move toward pleasure and away from pain. And so if you want to widen your frustration gap, give in to your desire to escape the pain. And recognize the creative avoidance patterns that you have, that you fall into, when really you're avoiding pain. You're not avoiding the work. You don't really mind holding parties. If somebody else would book them, you'd hold them. What you don't want is the pain of having to get on the phone and book them and deal with the rejection. So we tend to move away from anything that's going to cause us pain, all right? But if you want to close the frustration gap, leader, you must lean into the pain, embrace it, okay? Surrender your pain to Jesus. One of my favorite verses, and I think it's in Matthew. I don't want to misquote. Come unto me, all ye that weary and are heavy laden. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Something to that effect. Okay, y'all know what verse I'm talking about? And so, you know, there's Jesus with the oxen yoke on him, and it's for 2 oxen, so I get to be on the other one. So now it's this tandem thing. But think about this. Oxens are beasts of burden. They're work animals. Jesus doesn't say, take my yoke on you and let's go knock back on the couch and watch Game of Thrones. That's not what he's saying. And I'm not knocking Game of Thrones. I happen to actually enjoy it. But my point being, God's saying, work with me, but let me carry the load of the pain. You just be obedient. Lean into the work. Embrace the risk. No pain, no gain. Another thing that Pam said in that speech is that no one's going to turn off the noise and live well for you. You're going to have to fight for your best life, one day at a time. If your natural tendency is to escape the pain, join the club. You're human. But recognize that pattern for what it is, and that it's not going to change unless you intentionally choose not to give in to that unproductive habit or mindset. And you're going to narrow that gap and say, I can handle the pain. I can handle a little pain. It's worth it. The pain is worth it. The pain does go away when you win. Trust me, when you watch those football players cross the goal line, they are not thinking about how much it hurt to go up the middle, up the middle, up the middle, getting tackled and pummeled all the way. They're not thinking about how much they hurt. They're celebrating. And, you know, give God the glory when you win, but you got to refuse to be a victim in the process. Speaking of that creative avoidance patterns, just here's some things to think about. If you have a lot of D in your personality, chances are you get frustrated when things feel out of your control. And so under pressure, the default is, I'm going to put my time and energy into something I have control over. Think about that. Anybody nodding can recognize that in themselves?
Very long.
Huh? Can you? Okay.
Absolutely.
You know, we lose a lot of D's in Mary Kay to other jobs because they don't get enough big success quickly, and they don't feel like it's something they can control. So they go back to another job where they can be an authority figure and tell people what to do. All right. So recognize that if you find yourself creatively avoiding situations where you have little control, that's probably what you need to lean into. Because you can control the controllable factors. In every situation, there are some controllable factors. Even the people in the path of that hurricane, they have a choice about where they're going to hunker down or whether they're going to evacuate or not, and so forth. So in every situation, you do have some choices. If you have a lot of I in your style, chances are your escape mechanism is to go do something fun, or where people are going to affirm you. You know, it's going to be some sort of personal entertainment. And again, nothing wrong with that. I have plenty of personal entertainment in my day, but I do try to be mindful that what entertains me trains me, which was another great quote from seminar. So to choose my entertainment carefully, but also to understand that if you're seeking a lot of personal entertainment, okay, what are you avoiding? It's probably rejection. It's probably any time in your Mary Kay business you're in a approval seeking and you're not feeling like you're getting that approval. So just be mindful of that. If you have a lot of S in your style, and keep in mind, under pressure, leaders, we default to our normal style. Our most, even if your style has adjusted and shifted a lot over the years. We tease Stephanie about how she likes to say she's a D now. Used to be an S, but she's got a lot of D. And so we'll use that as an example. But under pressure, probably what will come out more is Stephanie's S than her D. So whatever your old natural, whatever temperament you came out of the womb with is what we tend to default to under pressure. So if there is a lot of S in your style, which, Stephanie would default to, I would tend to default to, and the S's in your unit would too, that is when we are feeling pain, we will sort of go into a nesting instinct, and we will start to creatively avoid work, or by doing things for our family or our home. Oh, let me clean out all these closets. They're really bugging me. Or my sister needs my help this week, or I need to take so-and-so to the doctor. That feathering our nest is a creative avoidance for us. And then the C's, the way we creatively avoid it is we start saying, I just need to figure out blank. I just need to figure out how blank. Because we feel like we cannot move forward if we don't have all the information, all the detailed information, so we're stuck. And so understand that, recognize those patterns in yourself, recognize them in your people. And it doesn't mean they're wrong, but creative avoidance is creative avoidance. And when we're creatively avoiding what's going to close the gap, we are in fact widening the gap, true? So I can always find something around my house to rearrange, organize, redecorate, redo. But the truth of the matter is, that's not going to get me my Mary Kay goals met or any money made. So, you just have to make those choices carefully. In conclusion, let me just say that first of all, you have to trust God daily. That's why I gave you an devotional book that says trust God day by day. It is a very daily thing. You're not in control. God is in control. And you're only, hopefully, at this point in your life, only seeking the approval of one. He's the one that called you to this, and he's the only one's approval you need. He'll also give you plenty of fun and laughs, I guarantee you, if you're seeking him first. God can take a lot better care of my family than I can. And I don't have to know all the why and all the analysis of, what in every detail to move forward. He knows all that. I am not omniscient, and I don't need to be. So really, if we give all of those needs that need to be in control, that need to be loved and approved of and affirmed and validated, that need to make sure that we're needed, and that need to understand everything and have our whys. If we need all that done, we're not really trusting God. We have to give all that to God and say, I no longer need to be in control. I no longer need people's approval. I no longer need to be needed by my family. And I no longer need to have all the answers. But God has all that, then we're free to work. That's allowing him to carry his yoke, and we carry our yoke. And he is so faithful. He is so faithful to hold up his end of that oxen yoke, ladies. He really is. Success is never about feelings, leaders. It's always about courage. And you can't ever count on feeling brave, so choose courage. Good leaders choose responses to their negative emotions that close the gap. They're all about eliminating frustration where they can. A certain amount of it's going to creep in no matter what on this side of the grave. And the enemy knows where you are vulnerable. But greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. Close the gap. All right, I'm done. Comments, questions?
Whew. Wow.
It's a lot, I know.
It is, and I felt like you're talking to all of us, that I've just been going through just a challenging time with this book 10 this month, and I made a commitment, and I felt all the things that you've been talking about today, and and I keep just having to coach myself every hour, every day, that it's not about feelings, it's about a commitment, and it's about making a radical change. And if none of you have started watching that Six-Figure Woman, I haven't finished it, but almost finished it. I mean, they talk about what, these are top directors, and some of them weren't on board when Amy put this challenge out there, and they were like, oh my gosh, what did she just ask me to do? But, when it came around to it and they finally made that commitment, just what kind of things, came from it. And I know that it's going to come from each one of us as well. And if you want something different, you have to be willing to dig. And it's going to be painful, and it's going to be frustrating, but you have to push through it. And like you just said, Dorothy, just trust and keep focusing on the numbers and getting yourself out there. And that is what I have been doing. And I've been really trying to be faithful to get out of the house more. And my affirmations are such that, I am getting out of the house, and I'm meeting people, and I am growing my circle of influence, and I'm not going to let my, the stories that I've told myself about being shy and that I can't go out there and do that, that it's scary. I'm not going to let it stop me anymore.
Good for you. Well, I applaud you, Jill. Thank you for that feedback. And I applaud you for coaching yourself well, because that's really my dream. Is not to be the voice in your ear, but for you to be your voice in your own ear. If it takes imagining that Dorothy is sitting on your shoulder saying, book another one, book another one, book another one till you get your book 10 done, that's fine. But ultimately, I want the voice you hear to be your own voice of encouragement. And so that's great, Jill, that you're doing that self-coaching. And these are universal feelings. You're not alone. And everything I'm teaching you, I've already had to eat it. The only reason I can feed it to you is because I've had to eat so much of it. I had to eat it till I was sick of it. And I'm still learning and I'm still growing, and you will be too on this side of the grave. But there are certain things that I can say to y'all with total conviction in the same way that you say things to your children with total conviction, because you've lived through it and you want them to succeed and you don't want them to have to learn the hard way. And you just want your kids to trust you, right? And God just wants us to trust him. And I just want you to trust me and trust the Mary Kay process and trust that girl in the mirror, because she's good. She is. Anybody else?
Different seasons of our life come with different challenges. But one of the things all the way back to DIQ, and I'm tired, so I may cry. One of the things all the way back to DIQ was that if I quit and didn't push through, I was modeling that for my children. Now, my children are young adults today, but it doesn't change because now there are different things they need modeled. Like, oh, does this ever stop? No, it doesn't ever stop. So, I feel grateful when Jill said the word commitment. I feel grateful for the fact that I'm committed to continue to raise my children, even though they're adults, through modeling, because there is a lot, as you said, and Pam Shaw said, that can train them.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose to be the one, even with them being adults, that trains them, mm-hmm. if they'll allow me, rather than the world. And so this job is hard. And the enemy does know all the tripping points. But there is some decision, there is a leeway of decision in there that you get to make. Am I going to be the voice, or am I going to let somebody else be the voice? And that has always been my drive, even though I'm not an S. I don't really have any S in my style, but I want to be that voice. And there are people beyond our children that need a voice too. And they want that voice. And I think that we don't often realize our consultants, particularly our difficult consultants, they are seeking a voice. And when we signed the agreement to be a director, we agreed to be the voice. And so, I did not want to do a book 10 last night. My life really did not allow for that last night. And I was at book 8 and I was stuck. But I knew if I didn't do book 10, I had no collateral with my people. I had nothing. And so it was not a good day to have to do that, but it had to happen. And so I think we have to realize the responsibility of this position, whether we knew that's what we were signing on for or not.
It really is, Paula. And directors, I'm going to address what you just said, but I forgot to say something that Jill said. That video, The Secrets of the Six-Figure Women, I did put it in your Voxer group. I also just posted it in the Miracle Morning Pacesetters Facebook page. And I told the Pacesetters, hey, you want to get a head start on your first homework assignment, watch this, post the 2 or 3 takeaways you had in the comments below, and I'm going to draw Monday from one of the people that comments and give away a prize, okay? So I'm not only wanting you to watch it, I'm wanting them to watch it. So whether you watch it in Voxer or you watch it in Facebook, make sure you go in and post your takeaways so you can be in the prize drawing. But back to Paula's book 10, one thing I'm going to ask the Pacesetters on Friday is this, and I'm going to ask you now, because today's the 6th, book 10 needs to be done by midnight tonight. I'm going to ask you, if you didn't get your book 10 done, why didn't you? Now, I'm not asking y'all to answer me out loud. If you didn't, why didn't you? Address that. Leaders fix that. It's either a limiting belief or it's poor time management. It's only one or the other. Either the limiting belief needs to be fixed or the time management needs to be fixed. End of story. Yes. Leanne, did you have something to say?
I've had so many ahas. I'm like, oh yeah. Go back to what not sure if it was Paula, maybe Paula said this. I think Paula said this, that I found that last month when I was coaching the ones that said they wanted more and was helping coach, that I had way more confidence last month and did not let anybody off the hook. And to be honest, I've offended about 3 people already last month because I've told them the truth. And one of them's already realized that she's not offended anymore. She just realized what she had said and how I had came back, and so this is not, it's really tough, but it's not tough when you do lead by example. It's a lot easier. And I just didn't let anything up.
Well, when you're holding 12 parties, nobody can tell you that no one's holding parties. No. When you've done 12 parties, nobody can tell you that you can't do a perfect 12. And directors, the missing link right now is, where are the personal career talks that are supposed to coincide with that? There needs to be a live career talk held for every party that's being held, at least one, because we're supposed to book at least 2 career talks from every party. That means if you book 2, you'll hold 1, correct? So if there's 30 parties in Leanne's unit, there needs to be 30 live career talks that took place too. If you personally held 5 parties in the month of August, there should have been at least 5 corresponding live personal career talks. That's what I want to say is, where is this piece? Okay, because there's not good, if you just go hold the parties, or your unit holds the parties, and there's not corresponding live career talks, there is no growth. And to think that there's going to be growth without it is delusional. What's going to happen without it is your unit size goes down and the frustration gap gets wider. Okay, so I really want to challenge each of you to do a poster like Leanne had. In my unit, this many parties and this many career talks are going to happen in September. If it's only 10 directors, if nobody around you wants to hold parties, you can do 10 of each, or 12 or 15, but you can cover 10. 10 parties, 10 live career talks. Because what's more important than getting that covered? And if there's and I know what it feels like to have to get on the phone and book it. It's like suck wind. But here's what you say to yourself: boy, I'm so thankful I'm not in Houston right now cleaning stuff out. Boy, I'm so glad I'm not living in a shelter. Boy, I'm so glad I've got clean running water. I can take a shower and I can flush my toilet. Okay, let me book.
It goes back to that. It's a privilege. I know Paula said that weeks ago, and it has stuck with me. It is. It's a privilege.
It is a privilege. You are in a privileged place.
You really are.
Stop affirming I have to and start affirming I get to. And I'm so thankful I get to.
For the last month, 6 weeks, whatever, I have thought, what in the world would be happening with my life if I had a real job? I would have been fired. But even really the last year, the way my life has been, we could not have survived this. We couldn't have survived what's going on in our lives. And so I think, what in the world would have happened to us if
look at everybody on the screen, because every single one of us would have been fired in the last year.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? But
not one of us on this screen would have been fired.
Yeah. So what if I had said, "Oh man, I can't do one more DIQ." What in the world? But we just don't know what's coming. God has such a setup, and Ken lost his job 2 years ago. Praise God. Praise God. How would we have done this if he had worked a retail job going through a Christmas or an Easter? What a great blessing that we couldn't even see at the time. And so, part of this, Dorothy, for me, is to stop second guessing God. I couldn't find my power book. You know where it was? It was under my devotional. Hello, where I haven't been for 4 days. Okay, so hello. There's an aha. There was no trusting in there. If I had been doing my devotional for the last 4 days instead of talking about how tired I was, I wouldn't have lost my power book. It's just as transparent as I can be. That's where it was, under the stack of devotionals. So, you know, God was like, well, huh.
Wow.
You know, sometimes we have to be shook. But we are so busy looking at today and what the problem is today and what we can't control today that we have no cognizance that God has got a plan for that. And, you know, I'm only talking to myself, so I don't know about the rest of you, but.
Okay, and so we're going to close on that because one of my affirmations is all that really matters is what I'm committed to today. My affirmation does not say all that really matters is whatever drama I'm dealing with today. No. All that really matters is what I'm committed to today. So, leader, are you committed to finishing your book 10 today? Are you
Yes.
committed to getting your 10 parties held this month and your 10 live career talks? Well, great. Then go prove it one day at a time. All right? Love everybody. I'm going to turn off the record feature now. And I know that I love you, and I feel so grateful to having each and every one of you. Let's keep praying for those people in Houston and South Florida and the Caribbean. It's just unbelievable what they're dealing with. And at the same time, work hard, make extra money so we can send them some help. All right? Goodbye, everybody. Love you.